thank you very much for your time. Good afternoon to all. And believe everyone of you coming from different times soon, and we will start the session soon. Me and Chan will be here to give you any question if you would like to ask us. Let us know. And this is one of the routine sessions that normally we will go through. To having with Canary together. And it's actually to guide you through how this session, this Canary can actually obtain data from MQTT brokers, and how easy it will be. It will be shown by Shawn. It's a pre-recorded session, and let us know if you got any question. Yeah.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our latest Canary coaching session. So in today's session, we learn how to log data using the Canary MQTT Collector. My name is Shawn Ebersole. I'm a solutions consultant with Canary, and I will lead you through the training today. And standing by in the chat, it will be Don Mast. Don is also a solution consultant here at Canary, and he is ready to address any of your questions that might pop up along the way. So feel free to use the Zoom features to ask your question. There's a Q&A feature that you can ask your question through. And today our goal, it's going to be to get you up to speed on using the Canary MQTT Collector in less than 30 minutes. So before we kick things off, I want to make sure you are all aware of our new Canary Community platform. So this serves as our home for Q&A forums. It has an interactive knowledge base and online learning tools. Members of the Canary Community can make product feature requests and view the roadmap to see what's on tap for future releases. And you can find a link to the Canary Community in the chat. And take a moment to check out our Help Center and be sure to sign up to join our community and interact with other Canary users. It's a one-stop shop for all things Canary. You can easily view upcoming webinars, training opportunities, and roadshow events. And actually, the next Canary Roadshow will take place in Chicago the week of September 13th. This is in-person only. It's an in-person only training event, and it's open to either end users or system integrators, or really anybody who wants to learn more about the Canary system. So the Chicago Roadshow will feature 3 full days of training and education opportunities around implementing SCADA and data historian technologies alongside other Industry 4.0 technologies. In addition to learning more about Canary, attendees will hear from other best-in-class companies like Opto22, TossiBox, HiveMQ, INS3, and more. You also have the chance to advance your knowledge of the TATSoft platform and receive hands-on training for advanced TATSoft solutions. So it's going to be a great event, and we hope to see you there. I believe Don dropped a link in the chat for the registration page. But now let's go ahead and jump into the topic for today's Canary coaching session and learn how to log data using the Canary MQTT Collector. So let's start at the very beginning. Since some of you joining today, maybe you're not real familiar with MQTT, but you like to definitely learn how to use our collector, I think it's important we just start with, what is MQTT? Well, the acronym itself, MQTT, it's short for Message Queuing Telemetry Transport. Sounds like something from Star Trek, but our partners over at HiveMQ describe it as the de facto standard for IoT messaging. Standardized by OASIS and ISO, MQTT Publish Subscribe protocol provides a scalable and reliable way to connect devices over the internet. Today, MQTT is used by many companies to connect millions of devices to the internet. So, why are these companies using MQTT? Well, for one, it requires very minimal resources since it's a very lightweight and inefficient protocol. And It supports bi-directional messaging between devices in the cloud. And it's very scalable. You can really scale to millions of connected devices using the protocol. And it also supports reliable message delivery through 3 quality of service levels. And it works well over unreliable networks. And finally, it has security enabled, so it works with TLS and other common authentication protocols. So before we begin, I'd just like to review a couple housekeeping items that you can keep in mind for after our training ends today. So as I mentioned in one of the previous slides, we have an interactive knowledge base with the Canary Community site. And within that knowledge base is an article with step-by-step instructions on how to configure the Canary MQTT Collector. I think Don will put the link on the screen in the chat, so please review that after our coaching session today. And also be sure to sign up for our project bootcamp under the Canary Community. The bootcamp will provide you with detailed training on the entire Canary system. But specifically, Don can add a direct link in our chat to the data logging portion of the bootcamp. In that part, it'll allow you to build out some actual MQTT logging sessions by subscribing your own local Canary MQTT collector to our Hive MQ broker up in our Canary cloud. And as you go through this, if it prompts you for a password to enter when you access the site, please use the word bootcamp in all lowercase letters. Now, if you really want to become the ultimate MQTT expert, I suggest you visit the website of our good friends over at Hive MQ. I think there'll be a link in the chat, and Don will put there to take you to their main MQTT education page. Well, with that, I think it's really time to get started. So let me start by, what we need to do to begin logging MQTT data. So the very first step, you'll need to select the MQTT Collector tile within the Canary Administrator application to create and manage MQTT data collection. And you'll see this in just a second. And next, we'll need to create a logging session. So within the MQTT Collector, tags are organized by connection groups. Each connection group represents a logging session that is writing tags to a data set. So to create a logging session, you'll need to do 4 key things. You'll need to create a new connection group. You'll need to have the credentials for the MQTT broker you wish to connect to. And then you'll need the subscription information to enter into the collector to subscribe with. And then you'll have the need then to configure a Canary sender session. So we're going to cover all this. So, enough with all the talking here. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay. So first thing we want to do, as you saw on the slide, was we wanted to go ahead and open up the MQTT collector tile. Now, the first screen that we see under the status page will be once we have 1 or more connection groups, we'll see the status and other information on this screen. But the next thing we want to cover is going to the configuration menu at the bottom here. So I have no connection groups to start with, so I'll just need to hit the plus sign. So now I'm into the area where I can start to configure, my first connection. So we'll need to name our connection group. I'm going to name this one Kamal, and WD short for Water District. And you'll see afterwards when you go through our boot camp why I'm naming it this specific way, because it matches our data up in our Hive MQ broker. Now, the next thing you'll need to enter is an MQTT client ID. Now, by default, there's one that just says Canary, but we can actually just click this little sort of like a recycle arrow here to generate a random client ID. So I'll go ahead and generate that. So every client that connects to an MQTT broker must have a unique ID like this. And this is actually MQTT requirement. It's not a Canary rule. It's a rule we have to follow. Now, next you have the primary application checkmark box. As you can see by default, mine's already checked, as yours will be as well. The purpose of this checkmark box is, and it's also, the primary application, sometimes you'll hear it called primary host, but checking this box ensures that the broker is notified whenever the Canary MQTT Collector is online. So whenever the MQTT Collector goes offline, the broker will detect that status, and the devices that are subscribed to the broker can then buffer until the Canary Collector is online again. And then once the connector or the collector is online again, the broker will publish all that buffer data from the devices into our collector for historical data storage. Next, there's an option to request device berths. Again, this is always checked off by default. And this box ensures that the full tag list is sent along with value updates. So if a tag sequence is received by our collector out of order, the collector will automatically request a rebirth back to the broker. This is basically an integrity check. So we recommend that you have that checked off. So next we'll need to set up our collector to communicate with the MQTT broker. So the next section we want to cover is servers. So there's always a default server selected here or in place, and we'll go ahead and overwrite some of these options. But it is important to note that you can actually connect to multiple brokers or multiple MQTT servers by hitting the add sign and having multiples. And this is great for high availability. So when one goes down, you're still connected to another one. So that's always something to keep in mind in those type of scenarios. But first of all, we'll need to put in our URI address. And I happen to have one handy here on my other screen. Go ahead and paste that in here. This will be the one that, if you follow along in the boot camp later, this will be the URI that you'll need to access our Hive MQTT Cloud Broker. So we'll go ahead and put in a username. And the password, and again, the username and password will also be in that documentation. Password is actually called roadshow 001 with a capital R. Now you'll notice I'm getting a warning that says the password will be sent to the broker unencrypted. And obviously, I would think in almost any case you would want it to be encrypted. So we need to, it's telling us to come down here and enable the SSLTLS checkmark box. And you see that warning went away. Now there is another checkmark box under the password that just allows you to store the configured password in plain text. And by default, it's unchecked because that could potentially be a security issue. There may be a one-off reason why maybe when you're doing some testing in a local network that you'd want that to be in plain text, but I would say 99.9% of the time you don't want to check this box off. Now next we want to establish a reconnect interval. By default it's set to 1 minute. Now the reconnect interval, so how this works is if the network connection drops between our MQTT broker and between our MQTT collector and the broker, this will be the interval in seconds between the attempts of our collector to connect with the broker. So by default it's set to 30 seconds. So it's set to 1 minute. So if my network goes down, I can't access our cloud broker. Every minute my collector will keep saying, "Hey, are you ready yet? Hey, are you ready yet?" And then the keep alive is where I said this is actually in seconds. This is a whole normal day, hours, minutes, seconds setting. But keep alive, what that means is if there is no traffic coming from the broker, which could be because maybe there's some tags that have slow update rates. So we're saying if we don't get any traffic coming into the collector, in this case every 30 seconds, then our collector will send or kind of make a handshake back to the broker just to say, "Hey, I'm still available. Go ahead and send me the information whenever you get it." Because there are some brokers out there that after a certain period of time, if they don't get any communication from the client, then it will actually just disconnect. So we want to avoid that by using this keep alive handshake feature. And as you can see, the clean session checkmark box was already checked off. And this is important. This is usually, we usually want to have that checked off as well, because this will kind of clear the cache in the broker. It basically wipes out any session that the broker has in memory from a previous MQTT client ID. So just kind of like when you go to use a calculator, make sure you hit the clear button ahead of time. That's kind of what that checkmark box does. Now, because we've enabled SSLTLS, it gave us two more options for a self-signed certificate. Essentially, we leave both of these, both certificate options unchecked. Now, the reasons you might check it off is if the broker is using a self-signed certificate, by checking that off, then we're saying, hey, we agree that self-signed certificate is authentic, even though it's not one that's been purchased and is from a certificate store. Because if we do connect and it has a self-signed certificate, we will get an error message. But more likely than not, you're probably not going to connect to a broker that has one. But if so, just check out that box off. And then finally, our client certificate. This would be typically the broker is the one that has a certificate. Like if we decided, hey, I want to have my own certificate, down here in the settings, we do have a certificate option that we can generate a certificate ourselves, and then we would check this off to let the broker know that we have a certificate, and that would have been assigned to us from the broker anyway. That's just like another extra security layer. So if you run into that, you'll need to check that box off. So at this point, I know, hey, I'm properly configured to connect to the server. Now I want to talk about subscribing once we made the connection. So under the subscription section, here's where I'll enter the topic information. Now, by default, there's one and this just stands for Sparkplug B version 1.0. Because again, if you're not real familiar with MQTT, especially with industrial data, we're using the Sparkplug B specification. There are other ways that you can use MQTT. I mean, MQTT can support all kinds of different files and such to pass across the internet. But we're talking about time series data, so Sparkplug V version 1 is what we're talking about. And then this is just simply some regex here. We're just saying that with the pound sign, we want to see all levels of the topic. So any subscriptions at any level, we want to go ahead and subscribe to that. Now I could get very specific in this case. I know anything that right now I'm going to subscribe to on the broker, I want to go ahead and bring in. Now the QoS, that stands for quality of service. Now there's three different settings. One is at most once, which is a 0. Then there's one at least once, which is a 1. And then finally, there's the QoS2, which is exactly once. Now, by default, we use a 0. So when you hear QoS 0, sometimes it's referred to as like a fire and forget. So this actual QoS level puts the least amount of strain on system resources, but data may occasionally be lost. This is really using really just the pipe itself, I guess the TLS itself, the settings that are there just to ensure the data arrives. TCP, but it's making sure the data just gets to the server, but we're not putting any other checks in place to ensure that it arrives. But if you have a very reliable connection, more than likely all your data is getting to the server with a stable connection. Now, if you have a 1, that guarantees the message is delivered at least one time to the receiver. So this QoS level puts a little more strain on your system resources than the 0, but not as much as level or QoS 2. Now the downside is with this option of QoS 1, duplicate messages might end up getting delivered because there's still real no confirmation coming back from the MQTT collector to let the broker know. Now, quality of service 2, this is what we call exactly once. So this guarantees that the message is delivered only one time properly, but there's more strain because there's more back and forth handshaking between the broker and our client, just to ensure that the message got there intact. So when in doubt, this should always be at 0 in most cases, unless the broker and how it can be handled with a higher quality of service setting. Now, enabled, this check mark box is always checked, because obviously we want our subscription to be enabled. If there's a reason where we want to take it offline for a while, we can uncheck that. Now, the data set prefix, this is what's actually going to go into the historian under this prefix, all the data. So whatever I type here will create a data set in our historian under that name, where our MQTT data is going to go. So I'm just going to call this, we'll call it webinar. There we go. Now, the next setting here, tags per data set, 25,000. Now, we like to say our max number of tags per data set is 50,000. We just set this at 25,000. So what happens is, if we are getting more tags coming in through our subscription than 25,000, it'll go ahead and create another data set. It'll be like webinar, -1 or -2 for the second data set under our connection. So remove tag name prefix number of branches. So what this allows us to do, I'm going to put a 3 here actually, because I know the way my data is structured that I'm subscribing to. But the way this is handled, we have 3 different levels, from MQTT. There's always a group ID, a node ID, and a device ID that's a name prefix at the beginning of the actual tag name. I don't need to see that in my system, but you do have to be careful, because you have to be sure that every tag, the first 3 levels of the branches in its name are all the same. Otherwise, I could be losing some structure to the tag, which could create duplications when I'm actually logging other topics as well. So it's really important that you know what you're doing before you just type a number in here. Automatically log all tags is a setting that I recommend checking, especially when we're working with our boot camp. We know all the tags that are in the MQTT broker that we're subscribed to. We want to collect all those and log them automatically. Now, if I don't uncheck it, that's not the end of the world. In a second, when we go into the actual list of tags in the tag list, that we can enable them there to be logged. But if you're pretty confident, you don't want to go through a long list of tags and manually enable them, just go ahead and check that off. Now, sync historian tags with births. This one allows you to be able to be notified if there's any new tags that come online, and have those come in as well. Typically, we would leave this as false, so the tags will only be added, to the historian, and then they'll just need to be manually removed if necessary. I think that's usually the setting most prefer. But once I have this all set, I can go ahead and apply that. And now that's all been configured. Now, one thing I do need to do here is, under my sender sessions next, I need to determine where we're sending the data to in the historian. Which historian machine is it? I'm sending mine to my local host, but you need to put in the name of your machine here. And then again, enabled is always pre-checked off, because again, we want to enable the sender. Now, the external property storage, if you check this off, what we're saying here is that we want to utilize any of the tag attributes, like tag properties. We want those to store in externally outside the historian. Now, if you're familiar with our historian, I'll go in here to where we configure the historian. And under the settings in the historian configuration, there's a check mark box. This is where we configure external property storage. Now, I don't have that set up on mine, but this is where we would be saying, hey, we want to store tag attributes separately outside the historian. That's just to save on disk space. So some of our larger customers utilize this. So again, this would have to be checked off first before we would go ahead and check the box off here inside of our configuration for the MQTT connection. And then finally, filters. If I want to go ahead and put a filter on my tag list, because keep in mind, I've subscribed to everything right now, but maybe I know that I only want to include tags that start with, and this is just a simple regex expression, that start with Kamal, because there's other tags from other sites, other locations that I don't want to include in my tag list. Now, the other option is the inverse of that. I could check this off and exclude those tags, so everything else would be stored, from my logging session. Now, tag properties, again, if you're utilizing the external property storage, this may be a case where you want to add to the list from here. I don't know many customers using this yet, but the option is there. We're going to remove that. And then finally, once I apply this, I can come down to status, and you see I have my connection all ready to go. What I need to do now is just simply click on the enable button. So now you see I made the connection. It shows I have a connection here, and now you see my subscribe tags. There's 254 that I subscribe to, but remember, I had put in that regex that filtered out all tags except for ones that start with Kamal. So there's 44 I'm actually logging out of that 254, and I'm getting live updates now. So if I go back into my configuration and come into my tag list here, it'll update. Still wasn't updated, but I'd be able to see all my other that come finally. There we go. So here's all the tags that I have listed here. Now you'll see most of them aren't enabled. They're the ones that start with Guadalupe. If we scroll on down my list, there we go. So there you see, there's my ones that started with Kamal, and they're going to that webinar data set, and they're enabled. And so that's how that whole filtering worked. So at this point, I've configured my MQTT collector, and I'm getting data in. So if I go into the historian and go into my database, we can now see here's our webinar data set. Here's our very first daily file, and I have 44 tags, and we're getting live data coming in. So one final thing, though, if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat if you haven't already. But I did want to point out at the very end of our presentation, going back to the Canary community, we have upcoming coaching events taking place. Tomorrow is our next one. On the 29th here, that's going to be an introduction to the Canary system at 11 o'clock. That's an hour long. It gives you a full demo of the software. And then next Wednesday, and in the next few Wednesdays, actually, starting August 4th, we have more coaching sessions coming up. We have next week on the 4th, same time, always 2:30 Eastern. It'll be the second part to Jeff's Canary module for ignition training. He's going to finish up the more advanced part of our Canary module. And on the 11th, we're going to have our CSV collection overview with Steve. He's going to take you through kind of similarly how I did with the MQTT collector. He's going to use our CSV collector and show you how that works. And there'll be some more coming up here in terms of some tips on design shortcuts within the Axiom application and how the function of using that relative date time in different areas of the system works. So just keep that in mind. Just kind of see if we have some questions here. Don't think I see any just yet here. And that's fine. If any questions come up, feel free. I think Dawn just put our contact information in the chat. There's our email addresses, and we'd be happy to even set up a one-on-one demo with you or just a short call to discuss your questions. But I think we've reached almost, I guess we got it covered in 29 minutes. We said that was our goal by 30. We hit our goal. So we got MQTT data logging. So thanks so much, everybody, for joining today. And we'll look forward to hopefully seeing maybe some of you tomorrow at 11 and hopefully next week as well at 2:30. Have a great day.
Thanks a lot, Shawn. Thank you, and for the participants, thanks a lot for all your time together to join this session. Let us know in this next 1 minute if you got any question that you want to ask us. You can type in the chat box. So me and Tan will be here to help you. In the case that you may think of some question later stage, you can also email us, at my email address, that joe.paul@matrixinvent.com over here. So like what Shawn mentioned, that we also now we actually partner with HiveMQ to also provide MQTT broker service in this region as well. In the case that you would like to know more, I mean, you can always let us know. We can contact you also to set up a one-to-one discussion with you across different countries. I mean, we are the partner for the whole Asia Pacific region, and yep, that's how it goes. Okay, if there's no question, we will keep this short, and then we will try to run all these coaching session as much as possible, so that we can fill our time sometime when during a very boring time during the pandemic, work from home. All right, thanks a lot, and we see you again in the next session. Thank you. Bye.